All right, so chapter 5. Biological communities. I think we talked before about the difference between species, population, and community. Remember those three words early on in chapter 3, right? We said that a species was all the same, or we might not have even defined species in all honesty. I know we did population and community though. So a population is a group of all the same species living in the same place at the same time. Okay? That's what a species is. A community is all the different species together at the same place at the same time. A lot of big words here, but in the end, that's all it's really meaning. A natural association, it's, I suppose, worth noting. So, good that I didn't just try to come up with a definition of species in my head. So what is a species? A species is a group of similar organisms whose members freely interbreed with one another in the wild to produce fertile offspring. And if you're wondering why we're talking about breeding and whatnot, that literally is like the legit definition of what a species is. And strictly speaking, different species cannot interbreed. There's a handful of reasons why. Some of them rather logistical. Some of them you wouldn't even think of. Sometimes you've got a nocturnal animal versus an animal that's out during the day, for example. Their chances of meeting and interbreeding are not so great just because of something as simple as they're not in the same place at the same time.
Sometimes different animals can
We're getting there actually. Now I'm not sure that's a natural one, but generally what we use is, and coyote's a good example as well. I can't remember. I know we have Canis familiaris. We've got Canis lupus, which is wolf. I forget what Canis coyote is, but it's not a hybrid. I don't think. If it was a hybrid, many moons ago. The example we usually give is a horse and a donkey. Okay, a horse and a donkey in, for lack of a better word, a natural environment, a barnyard. I suppose in the wild. Not too many wild donkeys out there, but a horse and a donkey. There really isn't any reason they can't do what they need to do. They're the same size, relatively speaking, so on and so forth. Okay, so they could make it happen. And in fact, they have made it happen. And they've actually had live babies. What do we call those live babies of horses and donkeys? Mules. All right. What's this weird thing about mules, though?
They can't make other mules like the liger can't make other ligers.
So they are not fertile. They cannot make more mules. You can't put a boy mule and a girl mule together and have them make baby mules. They could try, and I'm sure they will, but they're not going to have anything. So they're infertile. I'm going to have to look on the liger. I think just, again, it's one of those that they don't, lions and tigers don't actually live in the same place, I don't think. So in captivity they may have bred, but I don't think in nature they live in the same place. But so that is like legit the definition. And I went into grad school with that definition. And my advisor, first day I'd ever met him, said, "So do you mean to tell me that because what the hell did he study? Foraminifera and some weird little plankton." I see your hand. Give me a sec. Because they don't interbreed, that they're not a species? He was all serious and everything. And I'm like, I don't know, sir. And he was just yanking my chain to point out that, there are other ways. There are other ways. But generally speaking, any introductory level class you go into, that's the definition you're going to get. Yes, ma'am. Never. Grayish red pink squirrels. There's a thing called subspecies. All right, and when subspecies are around, they tend to pick their own unique niches, their own little environments. Do you have an example, in your backyard, in a field near you, you've seen red and gray interacting?
I think of it because I saw like two of them doing like the mating dance.
Oh, okay. Running around the tree together.
It's the first time I've ever seen that.
Now, it can be, the hell is it called? It's not dimorphism. There's a thing, like with birds. A lot of people know the male bird is way more colorful than the female bird. It can be perhaps that the female squirrel just wasn't as red as the male squirrel, But generally speaking, they don't go in the same environment. We in Ohio, where I grew up, we had red squirrel, brownish red squirrel, and then and I got here, and you guys got different squirrels.
I rarely see red squirrels at all.
Yeah. And then in another part we had black squirrels, just coal black. And then there's albino ones. So you could have an albino anywhere, but so there's a lot of different ones, and they should, if they allowed themselves, probably could interbreed, but I don't know for sure. Yes, sir. Pretty freaky.
Yeah, I don't know what I felt like a college kid sprayed painted black or something.
Or somebody's ferret got loose, or who knows what. Yeah, the black squirrels are interesting looking. They're called gray squirrels, technically, I think, but the black ones are very dark gray.
I remember seeing a black squirrel in middle school, and my friend and I made up like a fairy tale about it.
Yeah, we had where I went to grad school, we had a whole population of them, and we don't get into Punnett squares here, but the whole, Gregor Mendel Peapod thing, remember those? That the albinoism must get carried fairly easily because we had a huge population, and they were white. You think the black squirrels look freaky? The white ones with red eyes. That was really freaky looking. But there was enough of them that it must be able to be passed on fairly easily. So. Yeah, but. You get that if it's true, wasn't it? If it's truly recessive, it's only going to show up in 1 out of every 4. That's what I'm saying. If you get the 2, and if an albino marries an albino squirrel, they don't get married, but you know what I mean. They set up homestead together. That might be an isolation thing. They're shunned by the other squirrels. Who knows? We're getting into squirrel sociology now, that's a different class. I teach that in the summer. Anywho, just before we get way too off base here, so species, and going back to the different squirrels, it might even be at a genus level. Okay, I love squirrels, but I actually don't know if red squirrel, black squirrel, gray squirrel are subspecies or not. We get into the same conversation with dogs. Okay, what's a poodle versus what's a schnauzer versus what's a German shepherd? They talk about breeds, but you get into subspecies there as well. So anywho, genus and species, okay. Genus is always capitalized. So we mentioned Canis lupus before. So Canis is the dog, all right. That's the dog genus, canids. And then lupus would be lowercase. It's a lowercase L. Okay, Canis familiaris, the F would be lowercase. And you either type it in italics, which you guys can't use, most of you can't write in italics, some people can. But generally speaking, we underline it, okay? And that just makes it's a scientific goes all the way back to Linnaeus. That's how we just make it stand out, so to speak. So now we know what a species is, and a whole bunch of those in one area is a population, and then different populations would be a community. So you could talk about the squirrel community. They might even divide up a forest, okay? If you do have the red and the gray in your area. I'd be willing to bet that one of them lives on one side of the field and the other lives on the other. And you got the Romeo and Juliet thing going on there. All right. What was I going with all these question marks here? Species and a so I guess when we want to identify a species, I think is what I'm going for here. These are questions that you have to ask, all right, or that an ecologist would want to know. Maybe not you walking by it on the sidewalk, but an ecologist would want to know, all right, what role does this organism play in the community? All right. Typically, they're not going to be producers unless you pay a lot of attention to grass. But we're looking at, what level of consumer are they more than likely? And that's the second question then. Are they predator or are they prey? And predator or prey isn't always as simple as it seems. Back when I used to get to go to conferences, and I'm actually supposed to go to one this spring. I can't wait. It's been a long time. I walked by. I didn't have anything in particular to do, and I happened to walk by a door, the guy talking, and the sign outside said predatory snails of the Cretaceous. Now, when I think of predators, we got your liger there. I'm thinking lions and tigers and all kinds of.
Cats and maybe your dogs.
Well, cats are vicious predators. Yeah, that's a whole other story. But snails, do those ever come to mind? Yeah, no. What the hell is a snail going to catch and eat? Well, it turns out there's one thing they can catch: clams. So, and you may have actually ever seen this if you've been lucky enough to get to the beach and you like picking up seashells. You see a perfect little hole right at the back of where it would have been hinged. All right? That's from these vicious little predatory snails out there. Snails are amazing. If you ever have a fish tank, you should definitely get a snail. They have a rasper for a mouth. Vicious little critters. It's basically a serrated circle that spins back and forth. And it can literally bore through a clamshell, and then they slurp out the yummy goodies once they're in there. Nicely for us, it makes it perfect to put on a necklace then, with a nice little hole in the back. But seriously, now that you know about it, next time you're walking along the beach, you will find at least a couple of those clamshell sort of things with the hole in the back. And that was made by predatory snails. The more you know, right? All right. Symbiotic relationships. Do we know what symbiosis is? A couple of you do? All right. Go ahead. Mutually beneficial. Yeah, do you have anything to add? You had your hand up too. Is that pretty much what you had said? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, it's when two organisms get something out of working together. Okay? It's mutually beneficial. And again, when you're trying to study your various trophic levels and how this species fits into a community, that's something to think about. So the better question is, and I think we're just going to wrap up here with this sort of question. The better question is why would we want to know all this stuff about an organism? Why would anybody care? Okay. All right, that's true. That's definitely a good reason to think about, something to think about. Yeah, what else?
Know how it affects other species that might be more relevant to us, how it affects the environment, or
Okay.
relationships it has with other creatures that might be reflecting relationships we have with creatures.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? So, along those lines, one of the things is we have to assess stuff like this when they talk about, when they start calling it a nuisance species. All right? We've screwed up many times eradicating all the wolves because they were stealing somebody's chicken. And we find out later how much that messes up the food chain. I'm not a huge fan of hunting, but we talked about, one of the things that comes up is when they start putting limits on the deer population. Well, holy cow, how many deer? Deer are almost as fecunded as rabbits. They have a lot.
Eradicate all the sparrows, it
they were also trying to eat more of the grain.
I didn't know that example. That's a good one. So you really need to look before you talk about getting rid of a species, what role it plays, and whether or not, the unfortunate nuisance aspect of it has to be tolerated, should be tolerated, or not. And even with when you introduce a species, all right, a lot of the flowers you see along the roadsides were not native flowers. They escaped from gardens. Dandelion's a great example. We happen to be a very dandelion-friendly household, but that was not a native species. Is it out competing something? Yeah, probably. Purple loosestrife is another one. What's the one? Anybody in here boat? Not often, but what do you got? Why aren't you allowed to transfer your bilge water and all that stuff? You know anything about that? No. All right. No, not lily pads. That might be something, but I don't know about it. Zebra mussels. Zebra mussels, all right? They started in the Great Lakes. They're filter feeders. Hey, great, clean up the lakes. The problem is that there's all kind of tiny little fish that were lying on the stuff that the zebra mussels are eating. So the medium or fish that ate the little fish, that ate the big fish, that turns out all the stuff that they like to go and fish in the Great Lakes, they didn't have any food. So the walleye, the perch, all that stuff, they started to see declines in that. Over the when were the 90s? 30 years ago? Ish? 25, we'll say 25. I don't want to feel that old. In the 25 years since they were in the Great Lakes, they've made their way down into the waterways here, down into Cooperstown. There's signs. I spent some time at a nice little restaurant, we'll call it, not a bar, at a restaurant down by one of the lakes there, and there's several signs. Please don't transfer your water here, and so on and so forth. So they're all over the place now in 25 years. Move fast. So lots of reasons. This is people's jobs that they do every day. When they identify new species in areas, or someone wants to bring in a new species, we go through these questions. So this is actually like relevant stuff. All right, so we're going to end here.